Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this week's Cedarville Stories Podcast. I'm Mark Weinstein, and my guest today has a Hollywood story to share with us today. Sean Kisch, originally from Indianapolis, Indiana, got his start as a music copyist during his junior year at Cedarville University. Since graduation, he's worked on several blockbuster motion pictures in Hollywood, and he's here today to share his story with us. Let's go to my conversation with Sean Kisch on this week's Cedarville Stories Podcast. John, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks for getting up really early out in California. We're recording this podcast. It's 9 a.m. Eastern, so you know it's 6 a.m. Pacific. I know you had to get up earlier than that to make the podcast, so thank you for adjusting your schedule for us. But for today's podcast, I think it's important to start really at the basic understanding of what a music copy is, because until I read your story, I wasn't really sure what it was either. So for our audience, tell us what a music copyist is. What do you do?
Sure. Yeah, I answer that question a lot. Yeah, and thank you for having me here on the show. Yeah, the terms in the sort of music preparation world are very antiquated. They just kind of have stayed the same even as the technology has changed. So it used to be that copyists were literally copying by hand the music from a composer's score into parts. But now it all takes place through software. So it's sort of like all the background work that needs to take place to get a composer's music from the paper or from their computer onto the stands at a recording session. So a lot of the times when a composer is finished with their music, and I'm using air quotes there,
Sure.
It's got a lot of little details kind of left out, so we've got people that sort of clean up the MIDI data or like the musical data, and then we'll send it to an orchestrator who will put in a lot of the little details of like the dynamics and articulation, and here's exactly what the third trombone player is going to play, and that kind of thing. So the composer is still like very involved but the orchestrator just kind of comes in and fills in those fine details. And then from there, we'll make the orchestra parts in kind of the way that the players like to see their music. So a violin player likes to see their music a certain way. A harp player likes to see their music a certain way. So we're everyone on the team is kind of like an orchestra specialist, and knowing exactly how the players like to see their music, so that way they can sight read it efficiently.
So in the timeline of a music copyist, where you get the composer's music and then it's done for the symphony or whatever, for the movie or whatever, mm-hmm. Where are you in the process?
Yeah, so it's in the entire like movie making timeline. We are like right at the very, very end. So sometimes we'll be working on a film like 6 weeks before the movie comes out or something like that. And so the composers face very, very tight deadlines, and then we face very tight deadlines to turn that around for recording sessions. So
in reading your story, because we've done some stories about you as a student winning some competition, so it seems like you have been gifted. Talk us through your journey to become a music copyist. What was your journey like?
Yeah, right. You can't imagine very many people being like, I dream of being a music copyist when I grow up.
Right.
So I studied composition at Cedarville, and I still compose. And I knew when I was starting my degree that I wanted to be in film music, but certainly being in music preparation was not the goal at that point. But a couple of things kind of guided me into that space. I think one was, as a student, I went to some film festivals, scored some student short films and things like that there at Cedarville. And so that combination of sort of like the education plus the experience really solidified, like, yeah, I want to be in the film music world. And then from my own side of things, whenever I would watch movies, I would just like watch the credits all the way to the very end. Because, the composer kind of gets like the main music credit, but there's a whole team of people, not just the copyists, but audio engineers and people who do MIDI mockups, and of course the players and music editors and all these different things. And the company I work for, JoAnn Kane Music Service, was like in every credit in every big movie that I would watch over and over. And so I was like, oh, I wonder what they do and what what their involvement in the process is. And so when I learned more about them, I was like, oh yeah, this is a team that I would really enjoy being a part of. And even my just doing things like recitals at Cedarville. It's like, as a composer, you're doing music preparation, you're being your own music copyist,
Right.
at that point.
Right.
And I got a lot of joy out of just working in the notation softwares and things like that. The stuff that I do every day now, as I was, preparing for concerts or
Sure.
things like that.
Now, I want to get ultimately to some of the movies that you've worked on. But before we get there, you mentioned Cedarville and that it really was a great training ground for you. But I also know Dr. Austin Jakewith was a great mentor for you. Speak to how Cedarville prepared you, and then how Dr. Jakewith was really instrumental in helping you move forward.
I first stepped onto Cedarville's campus actually at music camp. So plug for music camp.
There you go.
And that was where I first met Dr. Jakewith. And he was honestly one of the big reasons why I decided to attend Cedarville, because I really liked his work, and I liked his work ethic. And just through my education, it was not just in the classroom, but it was in encouragement to go after student films, to attend film festivals, and to kind of go the extra mile. And so he was the reason I scored my first feature film. It was going to be one that he scored actually, but then another project came along, and sort of timelines didn't work out and things like that. And so he ended up offering a lot of that work to me, which I was very grateful for. And so a lot of the experience that I kind of got under my belt from the get-go was through him.
And that was as you were a student, you worked on a movie.
Yeah, it was a film called Christmas Ranch, and so it was kind of like a feel-good horse Christmas film. So it was a lot of fun to score, and the first of many projects.
So in 2016, as a junior, you competed in the Christian Worldview Film Festival, which you won. Speak to that experience and what it took for you to be successful, and what did you learn from that?
Yeah, that film festival in particular was quite impactful for me, getting a lot of experience under my belt in the film world, making lots of connections. And that competition actually in particular also opened up quite a few doors. Basically, the idea there is that there's a short film that has no score to it, and then a bunch of different composers will write a score for it, and so you've got all these different scores to the same film, and then the judges judge based on the creativity and the dramatic flow and all this stuff. So at that time, yeah, I think that was the same year that I was doing Christmas Ranch. I can't remember now if it was during or before, but and so as I was at that festival, I really didn't have much street cred to my name. But then upon winning the competition there at that festival, then it when I would introduce myself to people, it was just sort of like a touch point to be like, oh, this competition. They'd say, oh yeah, I heard about that. And then that sort of opened up the door for me to do my first TV miniseries called The King's Messengers. And then that, yeah, it
snowballs.
All it takes is one connection. Yeah, exactly.
That was your first snowball, which then ultimately has led to you working on a lot of movies in Hollywood, blockbusters as well. Can you name some of the movies that you've had a hand in music-wise?
Sure. I mean, as I mentioned, JoAnn Kane Music Service they're kind of like the gold standard of music preparation in Hollywood. So, we worked on a Minecraft movie, Lilo and Stitch. We've done Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, Avatar: The Way of Water.
Yeah.
Tons of Marvel shows, Star Wars shows, a Ahsoka and Obi-Wan Kenobi. But really the fun part for me is working for composers who are my heroes. So all of the clients at JKMS are people that I grew up listening to. So John Williams and Alan Silvestri and James Newton Howard and those guys. So it's people who I really look up to, and it's pretty crazy. Some days, sending one of them an email or picking up the phone, and it's like, oh yeah, it's John Williams on the other end. I mean, he's such a legend. So I do sometimes have to pinch myself.
So you lead me to the question. I want to talk to you about John Williams, because I know that in one movie specifically, I don't know which one, you can explain that, you actually worked from his handwritten work. Do you recall that?
Yeah. So that was for the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV series. So he still writes by hand. And so one day I came into the office and his handwritten sketch for the Obi-Wan Kenobi theme. He wrote a new theme for that TV show. Was just there on the desk, and so it's pretty crazy just being able to walk around the office and see that kind of stuff and hold that in your hand. To be sure, there is a whole team of people that is working on that, and even there's people in the office and remote, and so we all get to reference the sketches, via our servers and things like that. But getting to actually hold the paper and
Sure.
take a look at it and see sort of the very beginning of that process before it gets copied and everything like that is pretty cool.
That had to be very meaningful for you.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
So, Sean, when you're working for your company, do they parcel out certain ones to you and other people, or are you on most of them? Do you do most of the movies or the music, or how's that work?
Yeah, it's huge team effort for sure. And so there's usually people that sort of specialize in different parts of the process along the way. So there's some people that are on the MIDI team that will clean up the MIDI data before it goes to an orchestrator. There's some people that do the inputting, and so they've got that John Williams sketch there on their desk, and they're actually putting it in the notation software. I was hired on as a copyist originally. So then once it's input, breaking it into the different parts that the players see. But I was also on a team that does MIDI mockups, which is if the composer hasn't created an audio demo version of the score, then that's a service that we provide.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's a lot of fun because it's getting to hear the music sort of come to life before even the players get to play it. And in many ways, it's like you're the first person who gets to hear this kind of thing. And you're representing the composer's work to the director, because the director is going to then hear this audio demo and make decisions about do I like this music? Do I want it to be more exciting, or is it too exciting, or what, they're judging the composer's work based off of your demo. So there's a lot of pressure to make this sound as realistic as possible, as expressive as possible, but still stay underneath the dialogue and all these different things.
Right.
So that's been fun working on that side of thing. What I primarily do now actually is doing a lot of work with movies in concert. So after a lot of movies have already been, recorded and been a box office smash or whatever, they will, if they have been particularly successful, they'll get turned into a movie in concert. And I'm sure many people in your audience have been to some of these concerts where you can go see Harry Potter live to picture. And so it's the whole Harry Potter film, but then there's a live orchestra that's playing along to the film. So we've done that with Harry Potter, Star Wars, tons of John Williams films, Jurassic Park, E.T., Raiders of the Lost Ark, things like that. So it's really cool that the music gets a whole second life, getting played live afterwards. But you'd think just take the same music, from the film and slap it on the stands, but it actually needs to go through a whole different process to get it ready for that venue, because maybe the thing that they recorded at the recording stage is a little different because the music editor, trimmed a few things here or there, or maybe they cut a scene or repeated some music or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's, especially for the older films, it's a little bit of like a mystery work at first, figuring out like, okay, here's the original material, but here's what actually ended up on the DVD. How do we get these things to match exactly? And then there's all these other things of click tracks and streamers to help the conductor follow along and things like that, that go into making that movie and concert happen.
So that's fascinating, because I just assume when you I went last year to see at the Dayton Philharmonic Elf. So they showed the movie Elf, and then the orchestra played, and I just assumed it was just simple stuff, but there's actually a process behind to get it to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And Elf is one of our shows. So that came from JoAnn Kane Music Service. And it's everything from like tracking the changes to, a lot of scores will have synth elements or other things which are maybe not like easily played by an orchestra. And so then it will go to an orchestrator, but maybe back to the composer or something like that to make choices about like, oh, do we want like a synth player on stage to play these elements, or do we want to reorchestrate some things so that it's actually just being played by the live musicians? So there's a lot of work that goes into, because as I'm sure you experienced, it's like dead on with the picture. Like it's almost like watching the movie.
I was amazed at how great it was. So when you think of your career so far, it's, you're in your 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th year. Has there been a favorite movie that you've worked on, or a favorite experience that you'd like to share?
I think probably my favorite film to work on was Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, just because even when you're working on the smallest details of the film, just looking at a single part, you can still look and spot the theme, there in the music. And so just knowing that you're a part of this, very large film franchise that's so beloved by people is really special. I think another one also was maybe a little less well known, but the Peter Pan and Wendy live action remake. That was one that I did a lot of MIDI mock-ups for. And also the Disney Pinocchio remake. It's that one was worked on by Alan Silvestri, and so he's one of my heroes. So doing the MIDI mock-ups for that was like, wow, pinch me kind of moment.
Do you work with composers and musicians throughout this process? And if you do, what's the process look like?
It's very fast paced, and it really is all about realizing the composer's vision. So composers have very different ways of working. It can be someone who's very particular. They hardly need any orchestrating, and they're maybe writing by hand, to a composer who's getting ready for a recording session that needs a lot of improv that's going to be done. And so the parts that we're creating are going to be much more kind of flexible and free, so that musicians can improvise. So it all depends on kind of what the composer's process is. It's also very different from a full orchestra session that they're recording the entire movie over the course of several days, to maybe a smaller project. Maybe they just need a string quartet, or maybe it's going to be a longer process where there's going to be many cuts of the film. I mean, that's sort of the bane of a composer's existence, is the film's constantly getting edited as they're writing music. And so there's always V5 of the film, V6 of this cue, all these different things. And so sometimes we're playing catch up with that. So it really is all about serving the composer so that they can serve the picture.
Okay. So what's you mentioned different lengths of your work. What's a typical length that it takes you to take the music and get it to its final place so that it can be played?
Sure. I mean, it depends on how many steps are along the way. It's because we have such a large team, we can turn things around much quicker than just an individual or even a lot of other music prep houses. So, if a composer or if an orchestrator delivers like an entire film in a week, depending on the complexity of the film, or if it's for full orchestra, things like that, we can sometimes turn that around in like a 2 or 3 days or something like that.
Yeah.
Much more common is for a film to be recorded over the course of several weeks, and for the director to be able to give feedback as that happens. So it really depends. So sometimes it can be several months if the composer has that much time, that we'll be working on it off and on. And um, I came in, sort of as this project was finishing, but West Side Story, the Steven Spielberg remake, had like many lives over the course of several years, from sort of like initial demo sessions to recording with the actors to then becoming a movie in concert that's played live to picture, like I was talking about before. So I think JKMS was working on that project for like 4 years,
Really?
maybe even 5 years, something like that. Yeah, from the beginning all the way to the movie in concert.
So earlier you talked about, the original role of a music copyist is basically just, writing, changing by hand. So technology has changed everything, how you work. So even in your short period of time, how has technology improved your work so that you can be more efficient and effective in what you do?
Yeah. Well, how nerdy do you want me to go?
Oh, be nerdy, be nerdy.
So the nerdy story is that there's two notation softwares that were like the industry standard
Okay.
when I started, and they were called Finale and Sibelius. And almost exactly a year ago, the older one called Finale closed its doors. And so that in my industry, it was like the sky was falling or something like that. Um, there's another notation software called Dorico, which is like kind of taking its place. Um, so it is interesting how a change in the software can dramatically improve your workflow and your, the amount of time that it takes to do something. Like copying a movie in Finale uh, would take 3 times as long as doing it in Sibelius, just
Okay.
because of the way that the software worked. And so certainly changes in technology, and in specifically in how quickly you can do something, can really affect the timelines and kind of what's capable.
Yeah.
It's interesting, because everyone's talking about AI now, and how is AI going to
Right.
affect people's work, and we're all kind of waiting for AI to come after the music preparation industry. It's interesting because I think it's a specialized enough industry and a specialized enough software that it's been a little bit protected in the sense that there's just not enough people like working in the specific field to make it like really profitable. But it is certainly something that I have no doubt that it's coming for the process, and it'll be like anything else where it's like humans and AI are kind of working together. Um, and so we'll kind of see how that plays out. I mean, when it comes to any kind of art, I think that there will always be a market for the folks that are really creating original things.
Sure.
And so
Right.
music creators are certainly thinking about all the ethical things here.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You talk about creative project and creativity. What's the most creative project that you've worked on or maybe even enjoyed?
I am really blessed to be able to work on projects even outside of the copyist realm. And so
Okay.
I still do a lot of composing. Sometimes it's just personal projects, things that I'm doing for fun. But um, a couple months back, I was working on a film for a friend here in LA. It's a short film called "Forgive Me, Father." Really powerful message about forgiveness, and um, yeah, I don't want to spoil too much of the film, but yeah, kind of a heavy film with a really powerful message, um, and it is really a blast to get to work with my church family, because it was a friend who I worked at church, but on something creative and something that I'm passionate about. So yeah, doing short films and things like that with people here in town is one of the most creatively fulfilling things.
That's neat. And I don't want to leave the podcast without talking about how your faith intersects with what you do and who you are. So I guess we all believe LA, Hollywood, isn't really striving to follow Jesus every day like you are. How do you balance your work and stay true to your faith in Jesus?
That's a great question, and I'm so glad you brought it up. In moving to LA, I really felt strongly that LA was my mission field. I don't like to over spiritualize things, but I think it's not an exaggeration to say the Lord called me to LA. It just started out as just sort of a thought here or there of like, oh, I'm interested in movie music. When I was first starting my undergrad, like, yeah, I think I might like to move to LA or maybe New York or maybe Chicago or something like that. And then as I kind of went through my undergrad and then later through grad school, I really felt the Lord putting Los Angeles in specifically on my heart. And so it was actually during COVID. I graduated from with my master's degree sort of in the middle of the pandemic. And so that was the time when I really wanted to move to LA. I was like, all right, I've got my degree, like I'm ready to go.
Right.
And there were some things that sort of lined up that I was like, oh, I feel like God's opening the doors here for me to move to LA. And then COVID causes them all to close. And so it was quite a spiritually challenging time for me. I felt like, oh God, you were leading me down this path, and that, like, now where do I go? And so it was about a year and a half of waiting, just continually kind of putting feelers out to LA to my contact at JKMS and to other people who I knew in the industry, just saying like, hey, when do you think things are going to open back up? And it was hard. It was humbling. During that time, I was like working as a cook at the Cheesecake Factory and, teaching piano lessons and doing things like that. But I'm so glad now that I waited for the Lord's timing, because then when he did open up the door, it was like, boom, 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 boom. Everything opened up in the right timing. And I got plugged into a church, right away, which was a huge answer to prayer. A strong Bible believing church. And to your point about the challenges of living in LA, it certainly is different than living in the Midwest,
right.
But people are a lot more open to spirituality than I think most Midwesterners might expect.
Okay.
I think there's maybe the thought that like everyone in LA is like super anti-Christian or something like that, and very anti-Jesus. But people in LA are very open to spiritual things. They're into meditation, they're into astrology, they're into crystals, all this kind of stuff. So I have generally found that people are very open to talking about God and about purpose in their life and things like that. I think a bigger challenge is just that people have a pretty good life, and that people come to LA to take and to build a platform for themselves and to find their own purpose and things like that. And so it's not so much that people are antagonistic towards Jesus, but and I mean, this can be said about many people, recognizing your seriousness of your sin, your need for a personal savior, and recognizing that Jesus is the only way.
And when you are satisfied in life and you have everything that you think you want, the cars, the houses, the money, whatever, that can block that view. How have you seen the Lord use you to share the truth of the gospel? How have you seen the Lord use you in the lives of people you come in contact with, whether at church or just in the community or in your work?
Yeah, I mean, they say in the darkest places, the light shines the brightest. And
Yeah.
I found that I'm not speaking about myself, alone, but just my whole church community and the Christians in LA. Again, I think this is something that it's not going to get covered by the news media, but
Right.
there is such a powerful Christian presence here in Hollywood. I mean, there are like prayer walks that happen on like all the major studio lots. There's I don't know if you're familiar with a class called Alpha that takes non-believers through like the big questions about life through a Christian perspective. Those happen like on all of the major studio lots. There's an organization called the Hollywood Prayer Network that does an amazing job of like connecting Christians in the industry and sharing prayer requests with people. There's the Actors Co-op, which puts on family friendly, like inspiring shows. There's churches like Reality LA that I'm part of, and First Presbyterian of Hollywood and things like that
Sure.
are just a huge light here in the industry. And so even though there are a lot of people chasing after the wind, and getting the big houses and the big cars and things like that, there are so many opportunities to share Jesus, and I think people who are open to it, and opportunities to serve, the least of these as well. Obviously, huge unhoused community in Los Angeles, and so there's the Hope Center in Hollywood, which serves hot meals. I think they serve probably close to like 250 hot meals every day, to people in need, and so there are opportunities everywhere, and I feel very fortunate to be a small part of it, but also to just have a really profound sense of purpose in the mission, here in LA.
I think it's great that you are there and you're doing what you do professionally, but I'm thrilled to know that you're like a Cedarville missionary for the Lord out in Southern California. And so as we leave this podcast today, I want to encourage our listeners and viewers to, as Sean comes to mind, pray for him as he is doing fun work, but it's an important work and important ministry in on the streets of LA, in his church, and wherever he goes. So pray for Sean, and if you're interested in a degree like what Sean got here at Cedarville, you're interested in music, you're interested in working with top flight faculty in music, I encourage you to visit Cedarville's website, cedarville.edu, and learn more. Come out for a visit, and we'll see where the Lord leads you. So, Sean, our time is up. I really appreciate you getting up early this morning. Great podcast, great information, and we'll just pray for you as you continue to do what the Lord has called you to do out in LA. So thanks for joining me this week on the Cedarville Stories Podcast. Thank you for listening to the Cedarville Stories Podcast, brought to you by Cedarville University. Be sure to come back next week when we'll share another Cedarville story for God's glory.